left so left behind me. Then it flew from both clouds, heaven blocked me from the sun. I smiled and looked around, can't remember where I came from. And then I laid my head, laid my head, laid my head quietly,
quietly,
joyfully,
joyfully,
gratefully. I shall be, 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 I shall be forever free, forever free, forever,
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 forever. I shall be free. I dove into the ocean, started swimming across the sea. I held my heart wide open, let my joy carry me. And I shouted out to my brothers, jump in, the water's fine. And I shouted out to my sisters, let go, you know it's time. And you can swim real slow, you can swim real slow, you can swim real slow, as you please,
as you please,
joyfully,
joyfully,
gratefully. And you shall be, 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 you shall be forever free, forever free, forever, forever, forever. You shall be free. Who will sing our song so strong it fills the canyons? We'll lift our hearts as love is our companion. And we shall be, 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 we shall be forever free, forever free, forever, forever, forever. We shall be free, forever,
forever,
forever. We shall be free. The sanctity of self is what I would like to talk about today. And I think it's important to remind ourselves of how this whole system works that we advocate here, the spiritual, I guess, the spiritual framework. And every morning, we start out with the opening prayer. And I'm going to talk about an abbreviated version of that, or use an abbreviated version here, just because it encompasses the idea, and it's the one I learned at the very beginning. But there's but one presence and one power in the universe, God the good omnipotent. We include in our statement in my life and in this church. But the universe pretty much covers it all, I think. But it's just, we say it in a more personal way because it makes it more personal, I guess. But we call this our foundation statement, and it's important to understand why. what that means. It doesn't mean that everyone has to believe that there's only one presence and one power in the universe, and that's a good presence and power. It's sometimes difficult to reconcile that, to make sense out of that, because it doesn't always look like there's a lot of good things going on, and that is not what it means. It doesn't mean that everything you look at, everything that's going on in the world is somehow good. But what it means is the underlying reality of all this sometimes chaos that we see. There is an underlying reality. And we remind ourselves of this because that becomes our starting point of thought. So we look at our lives, something's going on that we don't particularly understand. We say, God, why are you doing this, and all of that, and then we stop. And we say, no, there's only one presence, one power, and that's absolute good, and that's now working out through me. So we start our thinking from that place. We do a reset, a reboot, and we say, okay, here's how things appear, but the law says don't judge by appearances, because when I start judging by appearances, I create this endless loop tape. I look out, see things I don't like, I react, and this just goes back and forth. I talked a couple of weeks ago about the law of mind action. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. What do they produce? The thoughts I hold in mind produce more thoughts just like the thoughts I'm holding. So I look out at life and I say it's not good, and I react to that, and then life looks even worse when I have that reaction, when I'm not feeling so well. And I get caught in this loop. And so what I want to do is get back to my foundation, to get off that. And we don't deny things are happening, Emily Cady made the statement that there is no evil. And that upset a lot of people. Obviously there's evil. Obviously there are problems going on. Obviously there are evil people, all the things that we are normally thinking in terms of evil. And if we grew up in with a traditional background, good and evil are two powers. There's almost equal. And Satan is constantly, the evil power, the dark force is constantly vying for the control of the soul. So when she said there is no evil, what she was saying is the deepest reality, there's only one presence and one power, and that's God the good. There's not two powers. Any more than when the sun is shining and you hold your hand up and you see a shadow, that the shadow itself is a power. What she's saying is all that appears to be evil can be eliminated. The influence of that can be eliminated from our life, from our thought. But we have to get back to that starting point. One presence, one power. There's not two powers, one of which is working against me. And again, that's not an easy thing to grasp, and I understand why that was so controversial. When I read that when I was 16 years old, I understood what she was saying right off, that it's again like the law of mathematics. You make an error, there's no law of error, but you can experience the wrong calculation. But there's not a power in mathematics or a power that's working against the law of mathematics. It's pretty true. 2 and 2 is 4, no matter where you are, no matter what 2 and 2 things you're combining, you'll always end up with the same answer. It's infallible. And it goes on through algebra and all the kinds of mathematics that I never could figure out or understand, but there's no error, there's no evil, there's no nothing working against the law of mathematics. And if you think of God in the same way, one presence, one power, there's one truth, and that is good, and we can get back to that And as we do, we break that endless loop, that endless tape of action and reaction. We're subject to whatever's going on outside of us. That determines how high of a quality of life we have. So this version I was first presented with in my early days of attending Unity Church, and we call it a foundational statement because it's the starting point of our thinking. We are each an expression of this one presence and one power, which means our spiritual empowerment comes not from without, but from within. And when you think about that, we often think if I could just resolve this problem, I would feel more powerful, or I would regain my power. That's the fallacy that we fall into. And we don't, we eliminate a problem, and this is not anti-eliminating problems. It's about how we think. It's not, I never tell anybody what to think, but here's how to think. There's a big difference in that. You take your eye off of what is going on outside, and you bring it back to this idea there's one presence, one power. And it's like a light shining from my center to the circumference of my being. It doesn't necessarily make these things go away, but it does improve the quality of my life. I see it from a higher perspective. And see, if we were just dropped onto this planet with absolutely no memory of anything that ever happened here, this was a new experience for us, we would have an entirely different experience until we were here long enough to build up memories and build up, have relationships that don't work out, and things that would cause us to not like other people and all that, to accumulate experiences. But when you go on a vacation someplace, that's kind of the mindset. You're fresh, you're open, and you go to a place, you don't know all the history of that place, you don't know people are waking up depressed, or you don't know much about it. You just see all the good stuff, and you go for that reason. And that doesn't mean that all that other stuff isn't there, but the quality of your experience is better because of how you're seeing things. And when we are coming from that place of strength, we're more likely to be able to help out. We're more likely to be a positive influence of that situation. But what I'm saying is, instead of trying to gather, or depending on outer circumstances to feel and be strong and feel whole and the things that we desire to experience, we turn within. That's the whole basis of this teaching. And it's not ignoring anything, because when we are reacting only to what is happening in the realm of appearances, we're ignoring something major. That is the source of our being. When we are reacting in fear, we're ignoring the source of our being. When we turn our awareness to the source of our being, then our world begins to settle down, the way we see our world. We're not so overwhelmed by it. We're drawing from our strength. We find our center of power, as I call it. So our focus on the importance of meditation is based on the understanding that every individual can have a direct experience with God. This experience reveals the true nature, the sanctity of self. When I wrote my first book in 1990, Practical Guide to Meditation and Prayer, I purposely put meditation first in the title and in the subject material, because the practice of meditation is the most important. And why is that? Because when we practice it properly, we actually have an experience. We have a direct experience with God, or call it whatever you will. I think sometimes to call what we're looking for within, to call that God, I have no trouble doing that, but some people might, because that's a pretty big thing. I don't know what to look for. I'm looking for God within myself. What's that mean? So in my book, The Complete Soul, I suggested that we stop looking for God and just look for your soul. Put it more in your ballpark, something you can understand. I'm not sure I have God in me, but I know I have a soul. So I could probably find that. Because as Jesus said, the soul would be saying, if you have seen me, you've seen the Father. So we go within and we find this center of power, we find this center of peace, and we work on that. And that's the most important thing. We don't say if you come to a Unity church or if you read all these books, you'll get what you're looking for. We say if you go within yourself and open yourself to that inner experience, that's what you're looking for. And that's what gives you what you are looking for. That's what gives you, because what you're looking for is yourself. And you are not given a spirit of fear. You are center of life. And if you can just imagine God as this infinite ocean of energy in which we all live and move and have our being. And each one of us are like this spigot, this outlet. It would only make sense that if you want to connect to the infinite, you would go to the inner place. Because the more you go outside and look, the further away you get from it. And that's what a lot of people do. They travel all over the world to find God or to find themselves. But they don't travel just that short distance from the head to the heart, the head to the center. That's too complicated. They can't still the mind enough. They can't stay with that practice. What I would say, though, is every time you attempt to be still, even when you sit down and your mind is going 1,000 different directions, you are opening your intuitive faculty. Every time you say, I want to experience the soul, I want to experience God, I want to experience this center of universal energy. Every time you do that and make any attempt to experience it, you open just a little more that portal of imagination, that portal of intuition. And what will probably happen, rather than having some kind of an experience when you're sitting there with your eyes closed, you'll be going through your day and you'll experience this sense of gratitude or sense of awe. Something that seems to have nothing to do with anything. Why am I feeling so good? I shouldn't be feeling good. I have no reason to feel good. We feel good conditionally. We have to have a reason to feel good. But you might be going through your day and you just have this welling up of gratitude. And you probably won't even connect it to what you're doing, what you seem to be struggling with in your time of quiet. But see, just the act of saying, there is something in me, I don't know what it is, I don't know exactly how to experience it, but I'm going to try. You open your faith faculty, you open the imagination, you open your intuitive faculty. And you probably won't even know it. I was working on meditation in the early years for probably 2 years before I had any kind of experience at all that made me understand that something's happening here. And I wouldn't say necessarily, I don't like sharing that because you'll think, okay, it's going to take me 2 years. Well, I don't want to do that. Maybe I'm a slow learner, I don't know. I didn't know what I was looking for. And that's the problem. When we sit down and close our eyes, we start looking for something. We start looking for what we think it ought to look like. But we are to become as a child. That is, be open-minded. Children are very open. Beth and I we have these 2 trikes. I don't know, it sounds kind of silly, but it's these recumbent things. They have 2 wheels in the front and 1 wheel in the back, and you sit down low and you ride them, and they're a lot of fun. But I put them on a little trailer, and we go over to the riverfront trail, So I come home, and this little kid is about 8 years old, and he comes up and he's looking at him. He says, what is it? What are those things? And I said, well, I got it up to 300 miles an hour the other day. He said, you did? And I said, yeah. I looked in the little rearview mirror, and the trail was smoking. He said, I don't believe that. But he was prepared to believe it. He wanted to believe it. He was open and receptive, and I'm not saying be deceived by that. But it's when Jesus said to become as a child, we know what he's talking about. We know how children are. They're ready. They're ready for the game, whatever that is, and we analyze it. We get where we just don't know if we want to participate in that or not. But he's just saying, be open-minded, because when you close your eyes and nothing happens, and then the next day you go close your eyes and nothing happens, it's probably because you're doing the same thing over and over, the same mindset over and over. It's much better to sit down, and maybe you don't even close your eyes. If you close your eyes and your mind shoots all over the place, stop closing your eyes. Just work at whatever allows you to relax. But if you're doing the same thing over and over again, getting the same results, what's that the definition of? Insanity. I have such a hard time meditating, so I sit down and do the same thing. I just can't get past this. Okay, maybe we got to stop doing the same thing. So we look at that. How important is this? And that's the other problem. We don't have a value on the experience of God yet. In our head we do, intellectually we do. We think, gosh, if I could experience God, all my problems would be solved. But we don't know how to do that, and so we search for it. We're searching for God. We're trying to take the kingdom by storm, or by violence, as Jesus said. It's kind of the same principle. We're trying to get on, to grasp what it means. We read everything about it and we try to have that experience. Well, what I found out is the experiences I started having were nothing like anything I was expecting. So it's better to sit down and say, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm open and receptive. God knows, God knows this, it's a natural outpicturing that's taking place. Why do you want to know God? It's because God is saying, know me, long before you were saying, I need to know this. Before they call, I will answer. It's the same thing. It's pushing against us. It's pushing through us. And our desire to be more is that rooted in the truth that we are more already. And it knows, I don't know what I'm looking for, but it knows. And so I'm open and receptive. And if you're sitting there a while and nothing goes on, get up and go do something else. Then come back. Maybe do it 3 or 4 times a day. But to every time we do this, I think there's a couple verses in Daniel where an angel appears to him and says every time you began, even when you began looking, I was trying to find the scripture, I couldn't find it. But from the very beginning you started searching, I was responding. And if you think of it that way, because it'll look and feel different from anything you're expecting. Because it's not coming out of the realm of the intellect. It's coming from your soul. So be open and receptive to this. But that's why unity, it used to, it doesn't anymore, but it used to promote meditation first. And the word it used was, you're seeking silence with a capital S. And it's that point of stillness where you know your oneness with God. And you may call it something different, but all the early unity literature is filled with this idea of knowing yourself at the spiritual level. Think of God as the endless sea of universal life in which we live and move and have our being. This life energy bubbles forth like a fountain through the countless life forms that we see. The human being is the outlet most capable of expressing the widest range of life, love, power, and intelligence that is God. It is to our great advantage to come to know our spiritual source. So again, we're in this field of energy that we call God, and I know my more traditional friends don't like me calling God a field of energy, but I know that's what it is. But it's intelligent. Even physicists today are calling this, are suggesting that the underlying reality, the fundamental truth of the universe is consciousness. And that consciousness is intelligent. And that intelligence is expressing through every aspect of creation. That's what I talked about, and Jesus talked about, the birds of the air and all of that. They don't have this intellect, this imagination that blocks their relationship to their Creator. And that's why they flow along. That's why they don't store in barns and, worry about their future and so on. They live in the now. They're fully alive. I love watching birds and animals and stuff, and they're fully present every moment. And we are not. We've been given this wonderful gift of imagination, and we use it to terrorize ourselves. And we have to overcome our own use of this faculty. And I totally understand how we get into that. It's my imagination is run just as wild as anybody else's. But the difference between, that you can have just as bad of experience imagining something as actually having it happen, right? You can imagine something's going to happen and you get all tied up in knots, and come to find out it doesn't happen that way. I got a letter this week from the IRS. It said I had made 2 mistakes on my return, and my imagination went through the ceiling. I'm going to jail. Surely they finally caught me. They finally caught up with me. And it's like a heart stopper. And I didn't know what they were saying. It had to do with the Obamacare. I was on the insurance policy, and it was a very complicated thing. And it said I had claimed that we had an alternative family. And it made 2 statements that I absolutely did not understand. So I called the IRS. And you sit on the phone for 30 minutes listening to this horrible music. It just goes over and over. It's a loop thing, and by the time it's done, you go to sleep at night and you hear that. So your imagination can just really play some horrible tricks on you. Well, as I was sitting there listening to the music, I was going over my form and their letter they sent, and I realized that what they were saying wasn't true. That the places on the form I was to look were not incorrect. I did not file as an alternative family. I said, no, I didn't. I don't want that. But the damage was already done. And finally the guy comes on and we talked for a while, and you know how exciting it is to talk to an IRS agent where you were the 50th person that hour that they were talking to, and they want to get rid of you. But he said, yeah, it's a mistake on our part. So my imagination did a number on me in just a very short period of time. And so I sent him a couple of documents, and let it go. It's like, put it in the mail and let it go. It's okay. So I say to my imagination, you can calm down now, be at peace. But you see how that works. And it comes usually at times you're not expecting. What I would like to do is get to the point where you get a letter from the IRS and you have no reaction. Oh, how wonderful, this is great. I think that's called enlightenment. So obviously I'm going to have to return when I pass from this plane until I get over that IRS stuff. But that's, see, nothing happened. I mean, the reality of the situation is nothing happened except in my head. And that's the quality of life. You know, my whole quality of life just fell into the basement for a few minutes. And it just gradually started coming up because I realized, but see, that's the whole thing. We think when I solve this, then I can be at peace again. That's what we're locked into. That's what we're caught up in. But the time does come when things like that will not disturb us. When we are in the midst of a storm, and we will not be disturbed by that. But it's not because your soul will evolve. Your soul is fine. You know, my soul doesn't owe the IRS anything. Never will. They can't get money out of my soul. They think they can, I guess, but my soul is unaffected. It's my consciousness, it's my surface consciousness that is affected. And that's where I'm living. But if, like Jesus in the boat, you know, in the storm, he's asleep. He's just not having a problem with that appearance. You know, that's where we want to get. That's where we would like to be. But it doesn't mean that the soul has to evolve. It means that I put more priority on that level of my being rather than on the conscious that can be so easily upset. The Greek temple, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it has above the doorway, know thyself. And it's a call to undertake the work of consciously returning to our spiritual center. You know, that's wise advice. I'm not sure it means exactly what we think it means here in the West, but it seemed like it meant to free yourself of untruth or something like that, the actual Greek phrase. It's but the idea as we interpret it, to know thyself, is the most important thing that can happen. If you know yourself, you know God. And again, that's what I say in the complete soul. Don't worry about getting the big picture. You know, if you just touch yourself, find that center of power in yourself, you will find God, because it's one and the same. It's just an expression of God. You are an expression of God. Affirming the sanctity of the self is not an egotistical approach intended to build up the body-based self-image. That's what I think a lot of self-help material is. It's about building up the self-image. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. If you have a very low self-image and you're engaged in something that helps you feel better about yourself, that's a good start. But we want to go further than that. We don't want to create a new house built on sand, a stronger house built on sand. We want to build a house on the bedrock of the soul. So it's the acknowledgement that our spiritual source is limitless, that our very essence is divine, that the one presence and one power underlying all we see is the source of our individual power. As we come to know our indwelling Lord, we also come to know the sanctity of self. And that is true. So we'll have our moments, you know, we'll have our IRS letters and our times when the world makes no sense at all and we've succumbed to all of our fears and all of that stuff. But that's not you. And the sanctity of the self, it's getting back to that center, finding that center and bringing it out into our daily life. Okay. Thank you for coming out, and be safe. You know, we don't have to worry about smoke in the air anymore right now. It's a beautiful, beautiful day. And but just watch yourself, and so you can come back next week. All right. Thanks for coming out.
You've been watching a talk presented by Reverend Doug Bottorff at Independent Unity here in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. We would like to thank everyone who joined us here today, as well as those of you who joined us online. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to our channel, and be sure to share it with those you think who might benefit from this message. If this brought value to your life, please consider donating to us on PayPal. Thanks again for watching.